Now we are recording the class direct from Miron, Israel, in Likuti Torah. If you remember yesterday, we talked about the creation of the Jewish souls, where they come from. And this was part of an explanation of a sentence we say in the Hallel prayer, also in Psalms, say that the sea saw and it ran away, and the mountains danced. The sea saw and it ran away, and the mountains danced. So what does it mean? Why did the seas run away? And why did the mountains dance? So the Rebbe said this is metaphorical for two different levels of serving God. God created the world in order so that we should serve him. And all these potential ways of serving God are already in the air. Like, let's take music, right? Why is it that people hear beautiful music and they love music? Who made it that way? Why not, right? Why don't people swoon when they hear the sound of somebody pounding with a hammer or something? Why beautiful music? And why only if it's beautiful music? Why not just anybody just plays one instrument? Why does it work that way? Who said that, beautiful music or a beautiful picture makes people, excited? Why? Because that's the way that God created the world. God created the world, and certain things awaken in us love. Who created love? Who created pleasure? Well, all these things are creations of God. And God created the world in a very, very complicated and very mysterious and amazing and exciting way. And one of these things, the most amazing perhaps, is the fact that we can serve God. In fact, that's why God created the whole world, so that people could use their free wills and serve him. That's part of the whole nature. Just like, a person who is in tune with beautiful music, he hears the music, he likes it, he gets excited, right? He swoons. There's the same thing also with the creations. Some of them do it with their choice, some of them without, like the angels. They're all swooning and burning up because of godliness. But people, they have the ability to serve God. People are created in a world where God is concealed from them. The angels, God is revealed. That's why God created the world. All the books of Kabbalah and things talk about these amazing aspects of creation, the spiritual creation. Chassidut, Chabad especially, centers mostly on the Creator, on God, to appreciate the Creator more. In order to appreciate God more, so it comes to tell us God not only creates beautiful sunsets and human beings, but he also creates angels and these levels of spirituality, higher and higher and higher. These are all creations of God. So there's two ways of serving God. One way of serving God is like a minister of God. Minister is not a nice word. It's of this, like one of the, how do you call it? A big official, like a duke, a baron. And then there's a servant, a simple servant. The simple servants, they're like totally in a different world than the king. When the king appears, there just falls on them fear. They have to just totally negate all of their ideas about life and their plans and their thoughts and just totally surrender to the king. That's a servant. They serve from fear. And the big officials in the government, like the Secretary of State, the Secretary of whatever. So those people, they have the same sort of goals as the king does a little bit, and they serve from love. The king tells them how to make the country better, how to make this. He says, okay, so now let's talk about the Jewish souls. This reflects into the Jewish souls. That's what the Jews are chosen for. The Jewish people are chosen to tell the world about what God is, how good God is, but also how awesome God is, and also how demanding God is. True, if you don't do what God wants, he's not, what is it called? Revengeful, for certainly not now, not anymore. maybe time in the Holy Temple used to be that way, but not anymore. We see people can do all the sins in the world and they live good and they're happy and they're healthy. So now we can serve God from free. But nevertheless, the idea of serving God comes from what's called awe or fear. In other words, well, I was doing the wrong thing. I don't really know what's right. Let me look in the Torah and see what the right thing is to do. Sometimes it just seems so right to do things that are totally wrong. And people have the best intentions. All the religions in the world are the people with the best intentions. Right? And but they're wrong. They're totally wrong. They're based on falseness. It says in the prophet, the Maimonides brings it. And what could be better than religion? Religion is an ideal, wonderful thing. A person wants to serve the highest of values, the highest of ideals, be spiritual, serve God. It's wonderful. But the fact of the matter is that they're wrong. That's why the Torah is here, in order to tell us what God really is, right? Not to get mistaken ideas. So that's the idea of fear. Sometimes fear is a very good thing, and it keeps you from driving on the wrong side of the road. It keeps you from sticking your hand into fire, right? The fear is a good thing. It can be a good thing. Can be a good thing. Can be a bad thing also. If it's too much, a person can get paranoid. He can be afraid of life. Okay, now let's go back to the Jewish souls. The Jewish souls are created. Samach Riba Neshamos, the 600,000 Jewish souls are created from these letters of God's thought. Some sort of a mystical idea that I don't exactly understand, but it says it's from God's 600,000 letters of thought. It says that there's also 600,000 letters in the Torah, which of course there's much less letters than that, but if you count all the points and all the dots, there's different ways of doing it, but nevertheless it says there's a letter for each and every Jewish soul. That's how many Jewish men above the age of 20 got out of Egypt. So that's called the 600,000 letters, according to the 600,000 souls. These souls are called brothers to God. Shehem Amidos, these are what's called God's emotions. These souls that come from God's thought, like for instance, a person's thought, right? It says that God spoke. What do we say in the Bible? God spoke, he created the world. God said, let there be light. He said, let there be a firmament. He said. That's God's speech. Well, God's speech is preceded by God's thought. God's thought is where the Jewish people come from, Jewish souls. The Jews are connected to a more inner level of godliness than the rest of the world, which means that they have more responsibility to the Creator. And one of the responsibilities is to teach the whole world about how good God is. God creates them, and that God wants them to serve him. But the Jews, nevertheless, it says they rose up in God's thought. Shekala Utiyat, that all the letters are like one essence. In thought, the letters in your thought are like one with your consciousness, with your intelligence. Shebetocham, which is in them. Became machshavas, amidos, and also the thought of the emotions are united with the emotions, right? A person has love. Where does the love come from? It comes from a source. Those sources are called letters, because azim elokus mamish, this as they are in God's thought before they come out to be revealed, right? The world is revealed. Here we see a world, there's people in it, there's Jews, there's human beings, there's animals. Before they came out into the world, they were totally united with God. The Jewish souls were united in a different way. The Jewish souls, they were united in what's called the emotions of Atzilut. That's the highest of the four dimensions of reality. That's an aspect of God, which is, if you want to call it, pure godliness. In this world of Atzilut, it says that God and his life, in other words, his life force and all of his bodies, in other words, all the letters, everything is one. It's pure oneness. Sort of like a tree when it's in the seed, right? A tree when it's in the seed. So when the tree is in the seed, you can't really tell the difference between the apples and the fruits and the flowers and the branches and the trunk. It's all like one. The leaves, it's all one. So it is also the Jewish souls as they are in their source. That's total oneness. That's the source of the Jewish souls, and it's still there right now. It's just that's the source. That's the inner mystery. But in order for the souls to be an actual being, like we said, in order for a tree to that's in the seed to become a tree. The same thing as the Jewish souls, for them to come out and be a soul. Liot bechinat nivra, to be created with all these details. Shu bechinat nifrad me'ayin mamish, and it seems to be separate from the source, from ayin, from the nothingness, if you want to call it, of God, that God is not a thing. To be separate from its source. Shahari biyot ve'atzilut, when the souls are in their in the world of atzilut, the souls are totally one. Kigam mashe nikra b'shem otiot, that what we say that the souls are like the letters of God's thought, this is just the sachekat ta'azan. This is just in order that we could have some sort of a grasp on what we're talking about. Of really, ki lo machshavotay machshavotechem. It says that the Jewish souls rose up in God's thought, and it says that my thoughts are not like your thoughts. Don't think that there's some sort of physical, like, things that are separate from me. Ketiv, hu al yedei mirat malchuto. How can the souls become separate? How can they come out and be in this physical world? He says that's got my means of God's, what's called God's kingship. God's kingship is called the garment. That's when we say that God is a king of the universe. The Jewish people are supposed to say this 100 times a day, a blessing. Melech ha'olam, melech. This is the garment which conceals and hides God until there can be what seems to be a yesh, a separate world. So here we have the ultimate paradox. God is totally one. Nothing can be separate from God. But nevertheless, there are still levels of revelation of this oneness within God. Levels of oneness within God. And these levels of God's oneness, that's all the spiritual levels, spiritual worlds. But God is one. He creates everything. Nothing is outside of him. But God wants things to seem to be outside of him. He wants there to be a separate world. That's the whole story of the Bible. That's how the Bible starts off. God started speaking. Right in the beginning, there was the heavens and the earth, everything was all one. And then God spoke and he said something. This speaking is how God, so to speak, conceals over his oneness, and he creates a world. This is a Kabbalistic name for this, is called God's kingship. And that's what is referred to when the Psalms, when it says that God is a king, and he puts on garments of glory. This aspect of God's kingship, another name of it is God's speech, because the king rules by means of his speech. This aspect that God's kingship, this is what's called the lower of the 10 lowest of the 10 spheres of godliness. The highest is what's called chachma, they call it wisdom, God's life force. And the lowest is God's kingship. This aspect of kingship, this is God's ability to create things that seem to be totally separate from him. This is the garment, hagorim, which causes liot hithavut yesh, that things are totally separate. Human beings can be separate and even deny God's existence totally. Why did God do it? Because he wants to be a king, and there can't be a king without a people. And the word am in Hebrew also means to be dim, like you dim down the lights in the room, dim, amamot. Namely, God wants to be a king. He wants there to be a people. He wants there to be human beings that can choose him. Hainu nifredim davka. And human beings that are separate, seemingly separate from him, totally separate, and they can choose to do bad if they want to. That's the way God created us. That's what a human being is. The essence of a human being is free choice. Then there's yitachan, then only if there's a separate people can there be a king. A king, then he can be what's called elevated over them. It seems to be separate. That they can be in fear of the Creator. Shari al-mea banim, a person has 100 sons. Lo yikra av melech, the father is not called a king. He's called daddy. And therefore, nikra malchut yam. Therefore, this aspect of God's kingship that covers over, that's called the sea. And now we're going to get to the idea of the splitting of the sea. Ki, hine, kol mashi yesh biyabasha, everything that there is in the dry land, yesh biyam, there is in the sea. Rak, she'ein nir el, you just can't see it with your visible eye. Ki me'ayam, because the sea, water covers over everything in the sea. Right inside of the sea, there's these huge whales and big animals, you can't see anything. There's also gems and diamonds, who knows what there is, hidden cities. B'kach l'mayla, so it is also in the heavenly waters. The word for heaven in Hebrew is called shemayim. Mayim is water. Kain l'mayla, also above. These letters, Yehi or, that God spoke to create the world, let there be light, let there be a firmament. Hamachaya at the olamot. These letters and words that God spoke, they're above time. They're above, they're eternal. And this is before God created time. These letters of creation are what God creates the whole world from, the whole universe. They're above the spiritual. These letters of creation. And that's letters of God's speech. But the Jewish souls, it says, came up in God's thought, but he wanted them to be separate. They wanted to be people in the world like everybody else and to serve God. That's what God wanted. I don't know why he wanted it, but that's what he wanted. And he wants us to serve him also. It says when Mashiach comes and there's the raising of the dead, we'll understand everything. Everything will be clear. It says this aspect of God's letters enlivens everything. Hem ba'atzilut. This is an atzilut. But the yam, which we said is the level of malchut, the lowest level of atzilut, this covers over all this oneness, all these letters of God, is God's speech, God's thought, bilti yidgala, so that they shouldn't be revealed to the world. Because if there was no level of malchut, if there was nothing concealing, how do you want to call it, this filtering out the oneness of God, then there wouldn't be any creation. It's like turning on the lights in the movie theater. The light is too powerful. The beam of light on the screen in the movie theater, that's just light. And if the turn on all the lights in the theater, then that makes a bigger light, takes away the small lights. The same thing, if godliness would be revealed, there wouldn't be this filter, then there wouldn't be any world. And that's not what God wants. God wants there to be a world. Because if this godliness would be revealed, if there wasn't this aspect of malchut to filter out God's oneness, then the physical worlds would be totally negated in the spiritual worlds. Kabmashal, like the example, bittul ziva shemesh, like the ray of a sun, when it's still in the sun. The enu nir eliyesha, when the beams of the sun are in the sun, they're not beams. The only time a beam of the sun is called a beam is when it's outside of the sun. Same thing as here. The only time the world is a creation is when it seems to be outside of the creator. When you filter out the creator. Kacht Gashmi is also the physical, the world. If God would reveal himself like it was at Mount Sinai, then everything would be totally negated in its source. What is the source of everything? Ruchnis, the spiritual worlds which enliven the physical. The EF Liot Metziut Neshama, there couldn't be a separate soul, umalach, or an angel. She'em bechinit nifradim. These are separate creations. Even the spiritual worlds are enlivened by his spiritual worlds higher than them. Rak she'em be'ahava. Even the souls and the angels, that they are separate, but that they're separate, that they have love of God. It's not seen to them riyam mamash. So the angels and souls can have love of God because God is separate from them. In other words, they're a separate entity from God, so to speak. That's what it seems. This concealment is by means of malchut. This concealment of God, that God seems to be far from them and they're striving. The angels are burning up Kodesh to God, and we have a commandment to love God. God seems far away from us. Why? Because this aspect of malchut, which we call the sea. Kizeh klal gadol. This is a general principle in this aspect of God's kingship. He agoremet liot bechinat yesh. That it causes that there should be a separate, seemingly separate existence. Therefore, it's called Ema Tato. It's called the lower mother. This aspect of Malchut is called the lower mother, Umatranista, and sometimes it's called the queen. Aim, the mother of the sons. Like it says in the Sefer Shalboni Benoni, like it says in the book Tanya, in the name of the Zohar. And therefore, Hanashama, the soul, Shehi Bechinas Ibur B'Malchut, the souls which are pregnant. They're waiting there in this aspect of God's kingship. Ki b'shmini atzeret, it says in the last day of the holiday of Sukkot, that's when we start praying for rain. Moed Geshem, we start praying for rain. All the prayers are according to what we need in Israel. So in Israel, that's when the rainy season starts, is right after the holiday of Sukkot. Then the souls are drawn into the what's called the womb of Malchut. Souls are a different type of creation than everything else, especially the Jewish souls. These souls wait there for 7 months until the 7th day of Passover, and that is the day that they're given birth to. New souls are given birth to. Al derech mashal, similarly, in the physical world, shaliyoti tavud mahut, a vlad, in order for there to be a child, mina tipa, from the seed of the father, there has to be an ikuv, it has to be delayed and wait 7 months. 7 months is the minimum, or 9 months in the womb of the mother. That in the course of this time, by means that the fetus eats and drinks what its mother eats and drinks, nimshach bochayat, then the fetus grows and it becomes more alive until it becomes a separate being, comes out from the mother, it's not dependent on the mother anymore. Kach and neshama, also the souls as they are in the Atzilut, the Jewish souls, as they are in this world of Atzilut, which we said is the highest of the 4 dimensions of godliness. Shehi is bechinet ayin, and this level of Atzilut is like nothingness. It's totally negated to its source. Bichdei, in order to have it, something like the tree as it is in the seed. That's how the souls are in Atzilut. Shehit aveh lihiyot bechinet yesh, in order for them to be, the souls to become separate human beings, is by means of itakvus berechem. They have to delay in this aspect of malchut, which we said is also called the queen. It's also called the mother. This aspect of malchut, which that's the aspect of godliness that conceals God so he can make a world, God's speech. Therefore, it has to wait there for 7 months, and it eats and it drinks, etc. Spirituality, and there's drawn down all these upper lights of God. And therefore, on the 7th day of Passover, which is 7 months after this holiday of Shmini Atzeret, that's when the souls are born. Okay, so they come from the sea. Oh, now we're going to see how the sea gets split. So it means like this: in order that there could be birth, and the opening of the womb, in order that the soul can come out from the concealment to revelation, right? The Rebbe is using this all as a corresponding metaphor to the birth of a child. Also the same thing, the birth of the souls. They come, it's an aspect of creation which comes from this level of God's kingship, the inner aspect of God's kingship. But the souls come from this aspect which is called the womb, the mother. Malchut is also sometimes called the queen. It's called the king because it creates all the worlds, but it's called the queen because it also gives birth to souls. This is the lowest aspect of Malchut. There has to be Amshacha va'ora b'midas Malchus milamayla mishtalshus. In order for this soul to come out and to be revealed into the world, there has to be some sort of a revelation from above. But just think about it one instant. If you think about it, it's a very big miracle, right? A child gets born from a mother, not just a human being, any animal. If you think about it, it's very miraculous. Now, what really is the biggest miracle, right? The miracle is the first instant when the egg is fertilized and it starts to grow. Is that the first instant? Well, not really. Really, the biggest miracle is birth. It used to be at one time that giving birth was not such a simple thing as it is now. Giving birth was really tied up to a lot of danger. That's why even in the laws of Shabbat, says if a woman has to give birth, then you can defile the whole Shabbat. You can do anything that she wants to in order to to make her feel better or whatever, because she's in danger, right? The Shabbat is the holiest thing. You're not supposed to defile the Shabbat. Worst thing in the world, a Jew that doesn't keep the Shabbat in many aspects is like treated like a non-Jew. If he touches wine, it makes it not kosher, right? And in many aspects, he's like a non-Jew. He doesn't keep the Shabbat. But if a woman is giving birth, you can defile the whole Shabbat. It's like it becomes all of a sudden like Yom, like Sunday, Monday. Why? Because giving birth is a very, very dangerous thing. So it says, in order to give birth, the fact is that that's why they make, the Rebbe especially, made a big thing about birthdays. Birthday, the day that the actual child comes into the world is a very big miracle. Well, the fact is that in order for the child to come from the womb, where it's part of the mother, in order to come out into the world, you can, on one hand, you can say it's the most natural, it's just part of nature. Yes, you can say everything is nature. Yes, you can. But the Jewish people believe it's not. It is an incredible, incredible miracle. And therefore, in order to give, same thing in the spiritual worlds, in order for the souls to come out of this aspect of Malchut, there has to be a big miracle. There has to be some sort of a light that comes from above the whole entire system. And that's what the idea of the splitting of the sea. Like it says by the midwives in Egypt, right? Paro wanted to destroy all the children, and there were midwives that gave birth to all the children. It says that women used to give birth to 6 children at a time. It says the Mialdota Ivriot, one of them was called Shifra, one of them was called Pua. What does it mean? Pirush, it says Shem Ha Echad, Hey Echad. One, and now God's name, again, this is all part of this whole metaphor. God's name is Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey. This corresponds to 10 aspects of God's soul. The first Yud is Chachma, the second Hey is what's called Bina, the Vav is 6 emotions, and the last Hey is Malchut. Oh, this is this Malchut we're talking about. So it says Ha Echad, Hey Echad, and the Hey Rishona, the first Hey of God's name. And by means of this is the power of birth. So the first Hey of God's name, this is the power, this is the miracle power that comes down to the second Hey of God's name and gives birth from God to all these souls. And that's going to be the whole idea of the splitting of the sea, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now we'll learn a sikh. We'll continue the sikha that we learned from the Rebbe. Sikha is, let's see if we can get to this, huh? We'll see if we can get to it. 1 minute. One moment. Here, do it like this.